with coverage you can count on. This is the Erie News NOWCAST.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Kristen Allen. Thanks for joining us for tonight's edition of the Erie News NOWCAST. Tonight on Erie News Now, we remember the nearly 3,000 lives lost on September 11th, 2001, a day that forever changed our nation. This evening in Crawford County, nearly 100 people are walking to remember those lost. It was 110 stories to the top of the World Trade Center, so first responders and others are walking the equivalent, over 2,000 steps, up and down the Crawford County Fairgrounds grandstands to symbolize the same climb 20 years ago. Firefighters we spoke to say while they make the climb, suited up in full gear, they're thinking of the brave men and women who lost their lives on September 11th. All proceeds raised tonight will be donated to the National Fallen Firefighters Foundation, and we'll have more of that on Erie News Now at 10 and 11. And as we are less than 24 hours away from the 20th anniversary of 9/11, family members of those aboard Flight 93 that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, continue to return to the site all these years later. Our Eva Mastromatteo caught up with Gordon Felt. He's the president of Families of Flight 93 organization. Gordon's older brother, Edward, was a passenger that day heading from Newark, New Jersey to San Francisco. And it was Gordon who had to deliver the tragic news to his mother that day.
The only thing worse than telling your mother is hearing as a parent that your child is gone. I can't imagine it. But I had to. And I can imagine now because I've gone through it. And it's something that I would hope that others would never have to experience. Mom will be here, 89 years old. She'll be here with our whole family.
Gordon tells Erie News Now every time he comes to Shanksville, he feels closer to his brother. He'll be there tomorrow with nearly a dozen family members. They're all part of more than 500 Flight 93 family members, many of which have created a special bond with each other. And following the attacks on September 11th, our country was forced to ask itself a series of questions on the future of security in the U.S. Is America a soft target, and could an attack like this ever happen again? Our Isaac Petcash spoke with local safety personnel and has this report.
At the moment of impact, our nation's security personnel came to an abrupt realization. America wasn't as safe as we thought.
It was a huge shock. Quite honestly, you think that can never happen, and it certainly could never happen here.
Agencies like the FBI, Defense Department, and local EMS realizing there were fatal flaws in how the country kept people safe.
We had silos, law enforcement stayed in their silo, fire stayed in theirs.
You could have intelligence prior to 9/11 in each agency, and each agency may have never shared that intelligence with each other.
Since 9/11, security has been at the forefront of our nation's agenda. First and foremost, in the air, where the creation of the TSA, new technology, and our attention to detail have helped to solidify safety above ground.
You see a package and you're more aware of it, and I think that's what's helped America the last 20 years, is that we're more aware of things that we see and cognizant of those actions.
On land, the emphasis now on intelligence. Both human and intercepted intel has been key to halting coordinated attacks. And Clark tells us that info is now shared with any agency that needs to see it.
Certainly getting local and state law enforcement involved in the federal agencies and combining them together. Who knows more about their community than the local and state officers? It's incredible to me.
But terrorist threats will never just go away. So we asked, is America still a soft target? Robinson says soft is hard to categorize. He tells us America will always be a target, but fearing catastrophe day in and day out won't help our nation's safety.
Do we fundamentally change our collective beliefs and liberties and stuff like that to gain that temporary security, if you will?
And in Clark's eyes, the former FBI special agent tells us that while never impossible, it would now take an incredible effort for anyone to penetrate the country's defense system, as was done so easily 20 years ago.
We often don't get noticed, and people don't even know what they're doing to keep us safe, but believe me, they're out there trying their best every day to prevent something from happening.
Lost in the terrorist plane attacks, but hundreds of firefighters, medical staff, and police also lost their lives attempting to rescue people. Our Elspeth Meisner has a closer look at how 9/11 still affects firefighters today.
A beautiful fall day and just flipped the world upside down.
When the first planes hit, Deputy Chief Fred Gillespie was on the job in Erie. He didn't know his life was about to change.
The phone started ringing, and then the order came across, lock the firehouse up. No one's allowed in, no one's allowed out. If you go on a call, all doors have to be shut and locked before you leave.
Hundreds of miles away, his friend Barton Fendelman was on the streets of Manhattan.
And there was just dust and debris in the air, and an area that I knew really well, I didn't recognize at all.
As he helped take people to safety, some of his friends and fellow firefighters ran the other way into the debris and never returned.
The truck, we lost everybody, but I probably knew myself personally, probably up to 75 people just because of working. It was numbing.
He wasn't the only one who lost brothers.
343 it ended up being passed away. That's more than we have on the Erie Fire Department. That would have cleared out the whole Erie Fire Department in one shot.
Although September 11th was devastating, Fendelman says the struggle was just beginning. The days after, filled with countless memorial services, were just as challenging.
I was going to like 3-4 a weekend. I mean, on a day on a weekend, because there was just so many people I knew and so many memorials I wanted to go to. It's tough.
But there's an incredible amount of support from community members for their own firefighters.
From 20 years ago, made me this. I still have it, and every September 11th it comes out.
These friends have gone back to Ground Zero, even going through the museum. Gillespie has visited 3 times, vowing to never go back, but still returns.
I don't need to go back, but it's so important. It tells a story.
In the decades since, they've kept fighting fires, but always think of their fallen brothers.
I wonder where these guys would be today. This is the biggest thing.
Elspeth Meisner, Erie News Now.
Emotional trauma. They also worry about some of the physical effects of that day, including all of the harmful things they breathed in. Certainly wishing them the best and thanking our first responders for their service. Well, 20 years ago, the September 11th terrorist attacks stole American innocence and shook our national sense of security. But for one Erie family, the loss was profound and personal. Our Lisa Adams reports.
Frank Fode's home office is filled with bits and pieces of memories from a day that he and his wife Suzanne can never forget.
After we saw the second plane hit, it set in that we were being attacked.
Fode, a longtime physician in Erie, grew up in a Manhattan high-rise near the financial district. And with younger brothers Robert and Joseph working as New York firefighters, his shock quickly turned to fear.
But then that shifted to sheer terror, because this was where I grew up. This was my backyard. And I knew that my brothers, in some manner, shape, or form, were going to be called to serve there. They're both New York City firefighters at the time.
With New York phones down, the Fodes couldn't get through for any word on either brother until that night.
Got a message about 8 o'clock that night that there was contact with my brother Joseph, but no contact from my brother Robert. We never heard from him again.
Bobby, 42, with 3 children and remarried just that summer, was among the New York firefighters who ran toward the World Trade Center, even though his shift had ended, because that's who he was.
He loved being a firefighter. Bobby was larger than life. He was Mr. Energy, Mr. Go, Go, Go. Growing up, he saved a young man from drowning down at the lake. He would always stop and help people on the side of the road. He was just that kind of a kid.
And while the family liked to fantasize that Bobby was somewhere, in time, a photographer who had captured this image of his battalion.
That picture is probably taken 15 or 20 minutes before the South Tower went down.
The photo of firefighters coming up from the subway on Vesey Street and heading toward the command center in the smoking towers. That's Bobby at the back. Proved otherwise.
And so the thought is that his battalion was in the South Tower lobby when the building went down and they didn't have a chance to get out.
Brother Joseph, answering the alarm for all off-duty firefighters, biked to a firehouse near South Street, not his own.
Doors were open and he rode his bike in there and just started grabbing boots, jacket. He grabbed the memorial axe, so to speak, and made his way walking toward the World Trade Center.
Still blocks away when the tower collapsed, Joseph felt the deluge of debris, but his life was spared.
You know, they say the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh, and that day, unfortunately, he took Bobby, but fortunately, he gave Joseph back to us.
Finding closure without remains has never been easy.
He was one of the firefighters that were never found. There were families that had whole bodies, parts of bodies, pieces. He was never really found.
So no family time to reminisce in a funeral parlor, just his Proby photograph on an easel in the church as Frank delivered the eulogy.
I was standing at the pulpit with the back of the picture to me. Unbelievable. Just devastating not being able to say goodbye.
Robert's son Bobby, just 11 at the time of the tragedy, was devastated. This poignant published photo of him in a firefighter's helmet.
My nephew Bobby has always been very quiet. His father's death really affected him in a big way.
But now he's carrying on his father's legacy as a firefighter, even wearing his badge number.
It's what he wanted to do, and we all supported him for that. Yeah.
And Frank looks forward to the day he'll meet his brother Bobby again in heaven.
He was the life of the party. He was a clown, a jokester. He could be very serious. He could be very tough. He was awesome. He was my best friend.
The Fodies will head to New York to be with the family for the 20th anniversary memorial service. Well, thanks for joining us for the Erie News Nowcast. Join us for our next news at 10 p.m. on the CW and 11 p.m. on WICU and WSCE. Have a great night.